Okay, I'm going to play a documentary that the BBC produced probably about a year ago. It's about Libyan desert glass. And I'm going to make some commentaries. I'm going to fix some of the problems and mistakes that they've made with their analysis of it. So let's start the video.
Far out in a remote part of the Sahara Desert, there's a mystery. Scattered around in the sand are thousands of chunks of strange yellow-green glass.
It is really a mysterious glass, and we scientists are still kind of puzzled how these things form.
The ancient Egyptians knew of this extraordinary place, but for thousands of years, it's remained unexplained. Now, a group of scientists plans to finally solve this mystery.
It's very simple. The answer is simple. It's too simple to anybody to believe because it's just coming from the glass sky. The concave Earth, glass sky at 100 kilometers. It's very simple. However, I do believe it's more romantic to believe that it's a mystery where it's coming from. Most cognizant secret societies know very well where the Libyan desert glass came from. But anyway, let's continue.
It will take them on a journey from the depths of the desert to the Cairo Museum and the test site of the world's first atomic bomb.
No, it wasn't from an atomic bomb.
And what they reveal may pose an unsuspected threat to us all.
What I want to emphasize is that it's hugely bigger in energy than the atomic test, 10,000 times more powerful.
That's utterly nonsense and speculative. And also they have a nice convex fantasy model of the Earth there.
Heading for the great sand sea of the Egyptian Sahara Desert, a team of scientists is on a mission. Their aim? To discover why tons of a most unusual glass are lying in the middle of the desert.
They're on a mission to help produce this documentary to generate money. Okay, Libyan desert glass has been found to contain birefringence. Birefringence is the refraction of light in an anisotropic material, such as calcite or glass, in two slightly different directions. It casts a ray, so it has this doubling effect. So now, the mysterious double suns that you see sometimes, or the comet's tail splitting, or rainbows that have like a offset displacement of them, like quadruple rainbows. It's because the sunlight is being filtered through the birefringent glass sky.
One of the scientists, American physicist Mark Boslow, thinks he may at last have...
It's pathetic that these guys get paid for this. It's hard to believe that they're ignorant of the fact that there's a glass sky. So, I don't know.
Come up with the answer.
Gotta wonder if they're just acting.
It's a scientific mystery because it's unique.
It's not a mystery.
We don't know exactly what the process was that caused the creation of this glass.
The process, probably what happened was, there was a global flood 4,400 years ago. There's a celestial ocean that had sand in it. During the flood, the windows of heaven were open. That's why it has spiral patterns in the galaxies. They're all small. It's like drains coming out. Sand came out. The sand levitated at 100 kilometers at ionospheric levels. And it fused together rather quickly with the electromagnetic radiation.
pushed or compressed the atmosphere.
Pushed or compressed the
Oh, it's a
atmosphere,
natural
pushed it down.
phenomenon, and therefore it requires a natural explanation. It may be
That's a natural
a very
explanation.
unusual event, but it's certainly not a mystery that can't be solved.
That's correct. It's not a mystery.
It's correct.
Working
It's not
with
a mystery that can't
colleagues,
be solved.
Boslow has developed a dramatic new theory to explain how the mysterious glass was produced.
No, he's wrong.
He has a terrifying vision of what happened here. Now, for the first time, Boslow is in the desert to see the site for himself. He is hoping to find the final pieces of evidence to complete his theory.
I've been reading about this place for the last 20 years. There's only so much time you can spend sitting behind a computer looking at tables of numbers. That gives you a good quantitative idea, but it doesn't really give you intuition.
Good
To
word.
develop that intuition, I really think it's
Intuition. You
important.
can develop intuition. You either have it or you don't. Obviously, this man does not have intuition because he doesn't realize that there's a glass ceiling to the sky and the earth is concave. You don't develop that. It's something that's intrinsically innate.
Go out in the field and have a look.
Joining him are geologist Ali Barakat and geochemist Christian Kerbel, who, like Barakat, is an old desert hand. They have spent years studying the mysterious event
Pathetic.
which must have taken place in the desert.
We scientists have been interested in
This
these
is how when you just reject wisdom from the scripture. Job 37:18, Jeremiah 5:21 and
glasses
22,
for a very long time.
Psalm 104:9.
Because they are very different
Glass
from
sky.
any other natural glass
Just
that
glass
we
in
know.
the sky.
It's just such a mysterious
Happened after the
glass.
flood.
Barakat is Egypt's desert glass expert and has traveled to the area several times.
Must go to the south and go to the north.
the
I know the
Barakat.
area like my finger.
Barakat's interest dates back to 1998 and a remarkable discovery he was involved in. It took place in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Hidden away in a dark corner of the Tutankhamun exhibition was a necklace made of different colored gems. At its center was an intriguing yellow-green carved scarab. It was said to be chalcedony, a semi-precious stone.
Chalcedony. It's like calcite. Calcite has birefringence. Hey, so does Libyan desert glass.
But mineralogists were not so sure. Surrounded by armed guards and officials, Barakat and his colleague, Vincenzo de Micheli, were allowed to examine and test the jewel. And the tests revealed that the scarab was not a semi-precious stone.
I wonder if they're going to analyze
In fact,
this
it was made of
documentary
glass.
whether or not it has birefringence. I doubt
But it was not a glass like any other produced by the ancient Egyptians. Barakat had an idea where the glass came from.
I had an idea.
He knew of a 10th century Arabic book with a map inside, which showed the location of a large mineral deposit in the Egyptian Sahara Desert.
Foolishness.
And on the map, he describes the Mediterranean Sea in the north and the Red Sea to the east, and the Nile River, and the pyramid.
And far out in the desert, the book describes a mineral it calls peridot. Peridot is a greenish-yellow gem, but Barakat had never heard of peridot being found in this part of the desert.
I am very happy because I found this passage and this book, because he recorded for the first time the strange material.
Barakat guessed that the Arabs had discovered the source of the glass in Tutankhamun's necklace. What's more, he thought he had seen some pieces of the same glass. In the Geology Museum where he worked, there were samples of glass brought back from this part of the Sahara by an English explorer. In 1932, Patrick Clayton reported that far out in the desert, he had discovered chunks of glass scattered over thousands of square kilometers of desert. He had no idea how it had got there, but he brought back some samples. Since the discovery of Tutankhamun's jewel, several scientific teams have traveled into the Sahara to try to find answers to explain the origin of this unusual glass. Barakat and his team are the latest to make the journey out to the glass area. It's a long, hard journey through the desert. It will take them at least 3 days driving and 3 freezing nights before they can even start looking for any glass. Over the years, scientists have been struggling to find an explanation for how this unusual natural glass ended up in such a huge area of the Sahara.
Compared to some of the other glasses that we have in nature, these are really interesting because they are clear. They have a color and this pure silica composition that makes them really unique in the world. We know no other natural glasses that look like this or have a composition like this. And so we scientists are still kind of puzzled how these things form.
The puzzle for the scientists is that the desert glass is not like any other natural glass found on Earth.
Iridium and osmium.
Most natural glass is volcanic in origin.
In the sand, the terrestrial sand, they could not have come from the surrounding sand.
Volcanic glass forms when hot, molten magma solidifies rapidly, usually when it meets cold water. Volcanic glass is relatively common, but its chemical composition and dark color are quite unlike the desert glass.
Well, yeah, because that is terrestrial glass.
Over the years, there have been a few bizarre theories trying to explain what it's doing in the desert. One idea suggests this area was once swampy, and that the glass was left behind as sediment when the swamp dried up. A key aspect of this theory is that the glass forms slowly at low temperatures. But Christian Kerbel had some doubts.
No, it didn't.
When I first heard about this idea, I thought, well, it's an interesting one, that it forms at low temperature. But I wasn't quite convinced that the desert glass really forms this way. I thought, well, maybe there is a way we can find out if it formed in a high temperature or if it formed in a low temperature.
So the temperature of the ionosphere, the troposphere, is extremely hot. And it formed.
Kerbel turned for help to the Natural History Museum in Vienna, whom he's worked closely with in the past. Using their electron microscope, he searched the desert glass for a mineral called zircon. Zircon is remarkably stable, but starts to break down at high temperatures. Kerbel looked for zircon crystals that had begun to disintegrate.
And what this tells me is that the glass formed at a very short time and a high temperature. And to understand exactly which temperature we're looking at here, I need to analyze the different bits inside here.
As the zircon disintegrates, it forms light and dark patches. In the dark patches, the zircon has broken down into a form of silica. The amount of zircon left in these areas shows how far the disintegration has progressed and indicates the temperatures reached.
In the darker areas, we have less zircon and more silica. And what this tells us is that this little zircon crystal has decomposed partly because of the high temperature, but not completely.
There you go.
The ratio of the two elements tells me that the temperature was about 1,800 degrees Celsius.
1,800 degrees Celsius.
1,800 degrees Celsius is hot, incredibly hot. Volcanic lava is only about 1,100 degrees Celsius. Whatever happened here in the desert, the heat required to produce the glass was phenomenal. What Kerbal found convinced him and everybody else that they had to look for another explanation. There was only one thing they knew of that could create such a staggeringly high temperature that it melted the ground. A meteorite impacting with Earth.
Well, yeah, a meteorite, but it didn't just impact the Earth. It impacted the glass sky and shattered the sky. See, the glass sky was not created when the meteorite hit it. It just shattered it, just like throwing a baseball through a window. And that Earth is totally wrong. It's concave, not convex.
So there's a lot of material that falls on the Earth from outer space. Tons and tons of this material falls on the Earth every day. And most of them are very small, just like dust. Some of them are pebbles, and they make shooting stars in the atmosphere. And sometimes a really big meteorite hits the ground at very, very high speed. It melts the ground, it vaporizes the ground, and these high temperatures and pressures are enough to melt a huge quantity of rock.
If the molten rock formed by a meteorite impact cools rapidly, it can turn into glass.
That's not what happened. It was not the meteorite, it just shattered through the glass
There are, for
sky.
example, these glasses here, they're called tektites.
Tektites.
And they are
There you
thrown
go.
away
Tektites
from...
also have birefringence. Tektites are a mystery too. Because where they're found in strewn fields in Georgia and Texas, or Australia, or Europe, there are no impact craters nearby. Very, very far away. So they have to induce that a meteorite hit the ground and it went down into the ground and it liquefied obsidian rock, and this obsidian rock somehow squirted through the hole that it created, and it projected itself over 500 miles away and landed somewhere else. Totally, utterly ridiculous, because you understand that when a meteorite comes hitting the ground, it's already cooled off already. It doesn't have the temperature to liquefy
Thousands of
obsidian
kilometers
glass.
from the crater.
And they know this. Tektites are a mystery to them too. But if you understand there's a glass ceiling to the sky, it all makes sense. And they don't have to make all this money with this stupid documentary. They could just say, oh,
Mystery solved.
mystery solved. Glass sky.
But these glasses are very different in appearance and shape and size from the desert glass that we have here.
I'm sorry, I said
troposphere before. I meant thermosphere. Thermosphere is hot.
Kerbal is a world expert on meteorites. Even though the
Thermosphere
desert
is
glass
above the ionosphere. So this glass, it got really hot. Basically, what happened was when it came down during the flood, it didn't have time to come all the way down. It just fused as it was coming. I don't know. But anyway, whatever happened, it fused together and created this glass barrier. Probably during the thermosphere. And then it just kind of stopped hovering. It created this bubble all around the inside of the Earth. And it balanced itself at that 100-kilometer Kármán line level.
glass is so different from ordinary meteoritic glass, he is convinced it must have been formed by a meteorite.
No, he's wrong.
He hopes to find evidence of a massive meteorite impact in the desert. They still have one more day of driving before they can even start looking for any glass or any signs of what occurred. They are now in the heart of the Great Sand Sea. It's one of the most arid, inhospitable places on Earth. No one can live here. It can be 10 to 20 years between rainfalls. Extreme conditions even for the Sahara.
We are here.
Down.
We are here.
And on
okay.
this one here,
We are here.
and then the glass area is all this area. We'll camp at the end of the rocks and the sand here.
Right.
Like that, we'll make the camp sort of in the middle of the high concentration of the big glass.
Yeah.
Yeah, 25 or 5.
Summer temperatures can soar to well over 50 degrees Celsius. There are no roads, no tracks. The massive parallel sand dunes stretch for hundreds of kilometers north-south. Each dune is a challenge, and without highly skilled drivers, the cars could easily overturn as they slide down the soft sand.
Well within the range.
At last, they are approaching the area where the glass is found. One of the mysteries about the glass is that it's scattered over an area as big as Devon.
The site to me looks like Mars. I don't think there's any place on Earth that's this desolate, certainly no place I've ever been.
The glass is not thick on the ground, but pieces can be found scattered between the dunes.
I'd seen pictures of the glass before, but the first time I reached down and picked up a piece and held it up to the sun, it was very exciting.
No one knows how much glass is in the desert. Estimates range from hundreds to thousands of tons.
Oh, here's a piece. Oh, look at this. There's a nice one. And another one. So this is an area, and look down here on the ground. You can actually see it. If you look here, you see the nice pieces lying around here. There is a piece there. There's a piece there. There's a piece over there.
Most of the glass lying on the surface is small and rounded, sandblasted and polished by the sand and the wind.
Sandblast, yes.
Other pieces are
But when it originally fell, it was probably very hard and edgy.
buried in the sand and are much larger and rougher.
This one here is mostly pitted and dull because it has been sitting underground, and only the nice smooth shiny part was exposed to the sand, and underground it has been etched by water over hundreds or even thousands of years.
New pieces of glass can always be found, as the huge sand dunes are constantly shifting with the wind, moving at a staggering 10 meters a year.
It's interesting, every time you come here you find different glass.
There's certainly glass under the dunes.
There's certainly glass
And
under
so,
the dunes.
as these
the
dunes
dunes
move, they
more
reveal
glass
more
is
glass.
exposed indeed, yeah. So it's a very beautiful area too.
Yeah.
Although there are no obvious signs of meteorite impact, Barakat thinks there is some evidence, not in the glass, but in the rocks. On a previous trip, he found an unusual little black rock.
I collected it by chance. I found it by chance. I was looking for glass, and I found this strange, shiny black material. So it seems strange for me. So I carried to Cairo and did some tests.
And tests in Cairo revealed that tiny, shiny particles in the rock were diamonds. Similar diamonds have been found elsewhere where meteorites have
This is
landed,
terrestrial.
created by the high temperatures and pressures during the impact.
That's found everywhere, not just near me.
Barakat is now
There's no
searching for
impact.
more
There's
signs
no
of
crater.
impact in the sandstone rocks in the
There's
area.
no crater whatsoever.
A large meteorite smashing into the ground leaves behind other clues. Under the microscope, the tiny grains of quartz, which this sandstone is mostly made of, are usually clear inside. But Barakat and others have found samples where some of the quartz grains have distinctive lines caused by shock waves from an impact. This seems to provide more support for a meteorite impact here in the Sahara Desert. But it doesn't explain why the glass is so different from other meteoritic glass. The team can't agree about the significance of this evidence.
I'm really interested in the distribution of the shocked quartz relative to the glass.
Right.
Seems like the glass covers an area of hundreds of square kilometers, but it seems like the observation of shocked quartz is only in one spot.
Right, yeah. Well, I'm not sure that we know for sure yet where the shock quartz is.
Yeah,
there are a
we
few
don't know where it
spots that
is.
have been surveyed
We're
so
just
far
guessing.
and needs to be
Shock quartz
confirmed.
can be anywhere. It's irrelevant. Because the glass did not form from the terrestrial sand. It lacks iridium. I mean, the sand, the terrestrial sand, lacks iridium and osmium. And that's found in the glass. That means that the glass is extraterrestrial.
But Kerbal thinks he has made a discovery, which leaves no doubt as to the origin of the glass.
Orientation. But I think this sandstone is broken up.
Most of the glass is completely clear, but a few pieces are not.
The ones that show clear, white, and black all in one piece.
The pieces of glass with black streaks of material inside are key to Kerbal's discovery. To establish what the material trapped in the glass was made of, Kerbal examined it in his lab in Vienna. He analyzed it by bombarding the black bits of the glass with neutrons, and after weeks of measurements, found small traces of the exotic element iridium.
Here are the peaks that indicate the presence of the element iridium, and this is something we would not expect to find in rocks on the surface of the Earth, and this is characteristic for meteorites. So here we have very good evidence that a meteorite really hit the Earth and was incorporated with the glass when
It wasn't incorporated with the glass.
Finding
I
iridium
mean, it
is
could have been. It blended slightly with the glass, but for the most part, the glass shattered. But yeah, there could be parts of the glass that have mixed with the meteor.
but not conclusive evidence of a meteorite impact. After over a year of searching, Kerbal found another rare element, osmium.
Osmium.
The results are absolutely exciting. We see that the abundance of the element osmium is about 50 to 100 times higher than what we would ever find on the surface of the Earth. And more importantly, the ratios of the isotopes of osmium are very different from surface rocks of the Earth. They are clearly extraterrestrial and show that a meteorite hit the surface of the Earth and the sand when the desert glass formed. So we have a eureka moment here. We now know there was a meteorite impact.
No, you didn't hit it. Not when it formed. It was already formed. It simply struck the glass sky at an angle, not direct, but at an angle enough where when it penetrated through the glass sky, it landed very far, far away from where the glass landed. So the glass is stationary originally. Meteorites coming in at an angle. It shatters most of it, but it probably blends with some of it. And so the glass falls in one place. The meteor falls like hundreds miles away. That's why there's no impact crater. That's all it is. It's just like slightly melting, so we shattered the glass. I'll never find an impact crater there. It's not where the meteor landed.
Kerbal is now totally convinced that a meteorite was involved in forming the glass.
Not forming glass, no.
But there was an obvious problem with the meteorite theory.
Glass had already.
Perhaps the biggest problem of all.
Only with the surface.
A meteorite impact leaves behind a crater. And no one has ever found any trace of a crater in the area where the glass is found.
No crater.
For Kerbal, the lack of a crater doesn't create a problem. He has an easy answer.
I think what we're looking at is probably a very deeply eroded structure. A fresh young
Let's
crater
say it
looks
shattered
maybe like
the
this,
sky before it hit the
and it is filled in here with broken bits of rock and melt and so on. But with time, all this disappears, and all that we might have left is this central area here, which is very difficult to detect.
A meteorite large enough to scorch and melt such a vast area of ground had to be big. And even if the crater's been eroded, there is still one place from where it should be possible to spot it.
Booster ignition and liftoff.
Not believing the obvious that there's a glass crater.
Farouk Elbaz is head of the lab in Boston that interprets pictures of Earth taken by orbiting satellites. He's been looking at pictures from space since the 1960s. Back then, only about 20 impact craters had been found.
With the advent of satellite images from space and the fact that we're going to be recognizing all of these circular features, we now have at least 200 that are proven or semi-proven impact craters.
One reason there are not more known impact craters on Earth is that some are so big they can only be spotted from space. And the older they are, the harder they are to find.
It is really important to look for a crater that has the right age for the formation of this glass, because if we say that this glass is of meteorite origin, which is most likely, then there should be a crater of that age that would have formed that glass. So these things must come together.
To help Elbaz in his search, he needs to know the age when the glass was formed. And it is possible to pinpoint the age. One technique is based on the rate at which the element uranium decays. It leaves tiny scratch marks on the glass, which, when counted, gives its age. This method produced a date for the desert glass. It was formed nearly 30 million years ago.
No, that's not right.
It was...
No, you're forgetting about that light. The speed of light was much faster. Look up Barry Setterfield. He shows how that the measurement of light over the past 300 years has been quicker. So 6,000 years ago, it was exponentially faster, 10 to the 11th power.
An important result. But could they find a 30-million-year-old crater?
It wasn't 30 million years old.
It's not really a problem in this part of the world to locate a 20 to 30 million year old structure, because no matter what the erosive processes were like, you still have in the subsurface the imprint of that impact. For instance, we have the structure here in Chad that has been dated to be older than 200 million years, which means that anything that is 20 or 30 million years would certainly be visible.
So Elbaz and his team have been searching the area looking for suitable candidates.
We have some craters in here, a tiny one in here, larger craters in south of here, but nothing in that zone that can be called an impact crater. So here is the Great Sand Sea and the dunes going down southward this way, and the silica glass region is right here, and it is a little too far from any of the impact craters that we have formed around. So we conclude from that we have not really found the smoking gun for the silica glass in the Western Desert in Egypt.
You haven't found it. Just look up in the sky, 100 kilometers. You'll find it.
Whilst studying the satellite images, Elbaz spotted a circular formation that he thinks needs closer inspection. But the formation is 100 kilometers from the main concentration of glass, and other scientists remain doubtful that this could be the source.
Doesn't look like a crater to me. 100 kilometers?
Yet, if there's no crater, then some enormously powerful cosmic event happened here nearly 30 million years ago.
I just
and
told
left
you the
little
answer.
more than glass behind.
Meteor shatters through glass. Okay, the meteor lands far away. The glass lands at a different place. Simple.
It's this seemingly impossible puzzle which could be solved by the new theory Mark Voslo has developed.
What's wrong with people?
The theory starts with an observation made 60 years ago in the desert of New Mexico. The Trinity site is where the world's first atomic bomb was detonated.
No.
Sergeant Ben Benjamin was part of the official photographic team. He was just 22. Cameras were set up at several locations. Ben Benjamin was in a concrete bunker 6 miles from the blast site. For all of them, it was an awesome, almost surreal experience. At 5:29 on the morning of July the 16th, 1945, the bomb was exploded.
We had a PA system. They were counting down in seconds, and when it came to -10, I switched on all 4 cameras, and it went off, and it was incredibly bright. It turned out to be 20-some times the brightness of noonday sun. And my God, it was the most amazing thing that I had ever seen in my life, and I'll never forget it.
A mushroom cloud exploded into the sky with the force of 20,000 tons of TNT. A week after the explosion, Benjamin was allowed into Ground Zero. What he saw was startling.
And of course the whole tower that the device was on, all that steel, tons and tons of steel, was absolutely vaporized.
And a bigger surprise was what had happened to the ground.
It was covered with green glass, the melted sand here. All the sand had melted on the top.
Yeah, but did it have iridium and osmium?
A quarter-inch or so. This green glass was covering the whole entire area.
It doesn't look like Libyan desert glass.
And it was cracked and
it's opaque.
But one could walk on it
luster.
and it'd crunch. It would be
Completely
walking
different.
like on a field
It's
of
green.
maybe
It's way
ice.
too green too. Without iridium and osmium. No,
The sand
that's
was
not how it
transformed
happened.
into a thin layer of glass, covering an area
They
nearly
just
600
outruled a
meters
terrestrial
across.
origin. Why are they going back to that?
Could something similar have happened in the Egyptian desert, but on
No.
an even bigger scale?
No.
The area where the desert glass is found is huge.
From here we go down another about 10 or 15 kilometers and we find still some glass. And we go up about another 30 kilometers even and we find glass. We're very close to the center of the area where we have the glass around here.
If such a large area of glass was formed as a result of an explosion, it must have had the power of many thousands of atomic blasts. A natural explosion of that magnitude was completely unheard of. No one had any idea of how such a devastating blast could have been produced. The only clue came from a place called Tunguska in the forests of Siberia. In 1927, a Russian scientific expedition visited Tunguska to investigate a massive explosion. The explosion had actually occurred in 1908, but Tunguska is so remote it was nearly 20 years before they saw the scale of the devastation. They were astounded. More than 80 million trees had been destroyed. The scientists were puzzled. What could have caused such an enormous explosion? Their first thought was that it was a meteorite, but they couldn't find a crater. They returned to their laboratory and carried out a series of slightly odd experiments. No one had seen anything like this before, and Tunguska became a scientific mystery. Since then, scientists have had many theories, but it's now assumed that an extraterrestrial object somehow exploded about 8 kilometers up in the atmosphere. This aerial burst was equivalent to about 20 million tons of TNT.
So basically what they have to do, they're saying that something exploded above the ground and it rained down the glass. Well, I can just simply say it came from the glass sky. It shattered from the glass sky and rained down the fragments. So that's what I don't even need a crater. Plus, I have overwhelming evidence for a glass sky.
A similar
aside from the Libyan
but
desert
even
glass.
bigger happened in Egypt.
I'll get to that later.
What happened there was hot enough to melt the ground over thousands of square kilometers. This is where Boslow's expertise comes into the story. At the Sandia Labs in New Mexico, he's developing a computer model to see if the airburst theory can be right. An event in 1994 was the turning point. The impact of the comet Shoemaker-Levy with the planet Jupiter. When the comet went into orbit around Jupiter, it broke up into over 20 fragments. Then, one by one, these fragments hurtled down into the Jovian atmosphere.
It's much
Nothing
easier to say that the
similar
fragments
has ever
came
been
from the
witnessed.
glass sky. It's just saying.
I think that the impact on Jupiter was really one of the most exciting things to ever happen in the history of science.
Boslow's speciality is the physics of large impacts, and for that, he uses computer simulations.
The glass
For
is
Boslow,
totally
the
different.
Shoemaker-Levy comet was
they
to be
found
the
in
biggest,
New
most
Mexico.
exciting
It's
experiment
opaque, it's
imaginable.
greener, it doesn't have
This was a real opportunity to see something that we couldn't see in the laboratory. Something of a scale, of a magnitude way beyond anything imaginable.
Wow, these guys get
beyond
paid for
our wildest dreams.
bullshit. It's sad.
Boslow's
It's so
team
sad.
had been developing a
answer's
new
so
theory
simple.
which predicted that the impact would produce a massive fireball.
This is a sequence of snapshots from our simulations. The top image shows this incandescent fireball rising over Jupiter's horizon to be seen from Earth. And in subsequent frames, you see this fireball growing and cooling, but growing into this enormous plume to very high altitudes. It just gets huge.
When the fragments of Shoemaker-Levy smashed into Jupiter, the pictures from the Hubble telescope were just as spectacular as the simulation predicted.
When we saw the Hubble Space Telescope images for the first time, we were so excited to see this spectacular plume rising over the horizon.
Their predictions were very close.
These are actual observations, snapshots from the orbiting Hubble Space Telescope. In the first image, you see this incandescent fireball rising over the horizon, and in subsequent images, you see it growing into a plume,
Well, that's different than
and
the
it
CG
continues to grow to this enormous size.
This massive plume of hot gas they predicted was ejected well over 3,000 kilometers out into space.
It was a spectacular explosion. I mean, it was just a
It's not what happened here with the Libyan desert
enormous
glass.
explosion.
I know, it wasn't
Anything
3,000,
anybody's
whatever
ever
you said,
experienced in the solar
kilometers.
system.
Because
The
everything is small inside
Shoemaker-Levy
the
impact
Earth.
on Jupiter was a pivotal
Jupiter's
moment in
small.
science. It made scientists rethink what could happen
Jupiter's
here
about
on
the size
Earth.
of a house.
So this really was a turning point in my understanding about how impacts work. I and most people thought of impacts on Earth as events that create craters, collisions with the solid Earth, and typically
let's
we ignore the
redefine
atmosphere. We ignore
what an
atmospheric
impact
effects.
crater is.
Well, the atmosphere is tremendously important, and,
Oh, yes, it
and
is.
this is the lesson we learned from this.
The Shoemaker-Levy explosion had been observed
Foolish
with
people.
interest by another scientist too, John Wasson, one of the world's top meteorite experts.
Top
He had also
meteorite
been puzzling
experts.
about the
What's his
origin
name?
of Egyptian
Sheds
desert
a flower
glass,
one of these
looking
days.
in particular at one special piece of the glass.
John?
It's special
By
because
references.
it has very distinct layers. The layers consist of dense glass, which is almost free of bubbles, and foamy glass, which is full of tiny little bubbles.
Okay.
Wasson believes the layers were formed by intense heat radiating from above, from an extremely hot sky. And he remembered the explosion over Tunguska.
When the thought came to me that it required a hot sky, I thought immediately of the Tunguska event. That's exactly the kind of event that I need. An aerial burst, but many, many times larger than Tunguska. Perhaps 1,000 times or even more times larger.
And the massive fireball produced on Jupiter by the comet Shoemaker-Levy seemed to offer a possible explanation.
Wrong.
I thought, how nice. The Shoemaker-Levy comet seemed to me to be ideal for producing an aerial burst and producing desert glass.
It set both Wasson and Boslow thinking, could a similar aerial burst happen here on Earth? To take this idea further, Boslow needed to adapt his computer model to simulate an aerial explosion. And for that, he needed more data. He wanted to see for himself how widely the glass was spread in the desert.
I think it's helped a lot to see the distribution of the glass, how widespread it is in some places, how concentrated it is in others.
Scientific papers say the glass is scattered over 6,500 square kilometers of desert.
Well, it's not clear to me whether the current distribution was the actual distribution when the event occurred.
Really? Why is
The
that?
Sahara only started to become a desert about 7,000 years ago. And during the last 30 million years, there have been big rivers and lakes here.
What I think is that the glass was originally at a much smaller area.
It's hard to believe looking around.
And now
It's
it's
kind of like
sand
crawl
and nothing but
expanding all over
sand.
the place.
There were
They had little
lakes
lakes.
here some time ago, and there was some
Little
water,
lakes.
and it transported the glass farther away from the area where it originated.
Oh, that's a good theory. Not.
Boslow is now confident that 30 million years ago, the distribution of the glass in Egypt was smaller than now. But it still needed a massive event to produce it. He fed the latest data into his computer model.
What we modeled is 120 meter diameter object entering the atmosphere at 20 kilometers per second. And we started off the simulation way above where this frame starts.
How much? 100 kilometers?
To explain the evidence of an actual impact found in the desert, the simulation allows a fragment of the meteorite to reach the ground and make a small
I just
crater.
love those simulations.
But such a small impact would not produce the glass.
Science fiction simulations.
The simulation also shows something far more powerful is happening at the same time.
Simulation.
Before reaching the ground, the incoming meteorite is burning up, leaving a trail of incandescent material in its wake. A massive column of fire, which turns
Complicate
into a
things.
fireball.
It's so easy. Such an
The
easy
widest temperature here is the temperature of the surface of the sun. And as it expands, the fireball is actually pinned against the surface, and it's moving very rapidly beyond hurricane force. So
Sorry,
we've got
that's not
this
gonna happen.
blast of air that's hotter than the melting temperature of the sand blowing across the sand, so it's melting the top surface, and then that melt freezes to form the glass.
And just like when Shoemaker-Levy impacted with Jupiter, an enormous plume of searing gas is streaming out into space.
So while all this material is creating this fireball down on the
get
ground
plume.
level, there's also a plume that's being
I'll give you a
formed at
plume.
much higher altitudes,
Up your ass.
80 to 100 kilometers above this level, and it's ejecting material out into space.
Is that what it's doing? You get
The simulation shows that even a relatively small 120-meter meteorite can create a fireball hot enough to produce the mass of glass in the Egyptian desert.
No.
It's an explosion that makes the first atomic bomb at Trinity look tiny.
What I want to emphasize is that it's hugely bigger in energy, hugely more powerful than the atomic test at Trinity. 10,000 times more powerful.
I guess it is.
Wasson and Boslow now think they've solved the mystery of how the desert glass was formed
I
in the
don't
Great
think-
Sand Sea.
I don't think they solved it. No. You ain't gonna win no
30 million years ago,
scientific awards.
an asteroid was on a collision course with Earth, heading for Egypt. As it began to burn up, it created a hot plume in its wake. Before reaching the ground, it exploded into a blistering fireball.
Oh, it just happened to explode before it hit the air. It hit like a hard pocket of air.
Surface
and
temperatures
exploded before it hit
immediately
the
reached
ground.
1,800 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
The ground, which was mostly sandstone, melted and was transformed into yellow-green glass. Above the surface, a column of superheated gas propelled itself into space.
No.
The total effect was far more devastating than if it had simply hit the ground.
This makes for good science fiction. It's kind of a romantic.
The theory
thing.
predicts that an aerial explosion is much more likely if
Easy
an
answers
object
are not
breaks up
romantic,
easily,
are they?
like the fragile comet Shoemaker-Levy. So how common are fragile objects in space? An encounter in 1997 proved an eye-opener to the scientific community when a NASA spacecraft flew past an asteroid called Matilda. Matilda's slow rotation showed it was not solid, but was a loose assembly of rock held together by gravity. They call it a flying rubble pile.
We've discovered a number of other asteroids which have similarly low densities, and this has led to a real paradigm shift where now it's accepted that most asteroids probably consist of rubble
why I feel
piles
such
and are extremely
fucking
weak.
hatred towards these idiots.
These rubble piles
easy to
are liable
understand.
to explode if they enter the
I heard
Earth's
of
atmosphere.
Alaska, Honey Club.
Watson believes that small explosions, like the one
Mystery
over
of Libyan
Tunguska,
glass.
could happen as often
Mystery
as
of
once
Texas.
every 100 years.
Mystery of Mega Crimea.
Larger ones, like the one over Egypt, are less frequent.
Occam's razor. Easiest answer
Watson
is
has
the most
evidence from one
likely
other place
scenario.
on Earth of a
It's
large
glass
aerial
into the
burst,
sky.
this one on a truly cataclysmic scale. He's found pieces of glass throughout Southeast Asia.
They can be recovered from a broad region of Thailand, Vietnam, southern China, and Cambodia. The curious thing about it is no crater has been found.
Wonder why.
Watson believes that about 800,000 years ago, a flying rubble pile broke up whilst on a collision course with Earth. Each fragment created its own fireball.
That's what happened. Yeah. That's exactly what happened.
Within this region, certainly, all the humans would have been killed. There would not be any hope for anything to survive.
Okay, enough bullshit science fiction.
Can we protect ourselves from this happening again?
Just shut up.
The suggestion in recent Hollywood films that a large asteroid
You mean this is
hitting
not
Earth should be
original?
blown up is possibly
Sure
not
is
the
what I
best
believe.
idea.
It's short.
In those movies, yeah, Hollywood certainly got it wrong. You can't just explode an asteroid just before it hits the Earth and suddenly the pieces disappear. Now you have a lot more smaller pieces hitting the Earth, and they're all making fireballs. You could actually make it much worse by attempting to explode an asteroid.
Shut up. Okay. This is it, guys. We're on the concave surface of the Earth. 100 kilometers is the Kármán line. There's a glass sky. There's an ice mantle attached to the glass sky. This is a truncated area of inner space. It's actually much wider. I just truncated it for this graphic. The sun, the moon, the planets orbit in here. This is inner space. This is the celestial sphere. It's actually glass as well. Stars are created by sonoluminescence. There's sand, and there's water above there. I've been there in a vision. The sand came down during the floods. It spiraled down, created spiral galaxies,
In the
thermosphere, temperatures get up to 2,000 degrees Celsius.
So
the water,
it
obviously
became very hot,
so it became steam.
But
Once it kept falling, it turned back into liquid again. However, the sand must have fused together. It got lower and it stopped lowering at 100 kilometers. That's what happened. Now, as far as Libyan desert glass origin is concerned, probably had a meteor circuiting inside inner space here, and it crashed through the glass, shattering the glass fragments. The meteor lands far away from where the glass lands. Part of the glass has iridium and osmium because it kind of blended a little bit. It's the same thing with tektites too. However, I believe with tektites, the meteors coming into the glass at a more acute angle. So it's actually the meteors melting through,
and it's landing far away from
where the tektites land.
And then the meteor also gets
encapsulated with glass. That's fusion crust. Fusion crust is burnt glass. Here, it's another way of looking at it. Meteors going through. This is the glass layer. There's the ice. The meteor starts skidding, gets hot.
It
melts through. Then the tektites drop, and the meteor keeps going. The meteor lands in a different place. It's very simple, guys.
So much
overwhelming evidence. Auroras.
In
late 1800s, scientists experimented with electric phenomena in glass containers, in which most of the air had been pumped out and produced there beams of what seems to be negatively charged particles, later named electrons. When electrons hit an obstacle, this is the key word, obstacle, they can produce light. Television screens and computer monitors operate the same way. So that's what happened. That's why auroras are formed, because there's glass. The Libyan desert glass has also been found to have birefringence. Book Advances in Geophysics by H.E. Landsberg and J. Van Myken. They both analyzed both Libyan desert glass and tektites. They both contain birefringence. Libyan desert glass, when viewed between cross Polaroids in sunlight, it showed birefringent streaks and patches. Hammett said reports an increase in density of moldavites. Moldavites are like tektites, basically, on annealing. Tektites show strained birefringence. Birefringence is the reason why you get these quadruple rainbows. The displacement rainbow is also why you get the comet split. Birefraction, birefringence, that's what's going on there. Same thing with the double suns in the sky. Birefringence. All makes sense, guys. Everything ties together now perfectly. Birefringence of the tektite. Nothing's a mystery anymore.
You don't have to make a BBC
documentary. See? You don't have to make a BBC documentary and make a bunch of money off of it. And romanticize its origin.
There's also a color inversion that takes
place. Obviously, you see the yellow Libyan desert glass, but you have a blue sky. But with the additive inversion going on of the sunlight, it inverts the sky. So we have a blue sky instead of a yellow sky because of whatever chemicals are in the atmosphere, whether it's phosphorus or neon or whatever, but it changes, it inverts the sky from yellow to blue.
Fusion crust.
Fusion crust. It's burnt glass. It's not coming from the rock. The glass coating is not coming from the rock like they tell you it is. It's just being dipped. The rock is being dipped in molten glass. That's all that's going on there.
All these atmospheric phenomena.
You got the circumzenith arcs. You got the sundogs. It's all because of glass. Just like if you look through a glass of water in the sunlight, it casts those same types of caustic anomalies. Meteor showers are just skidding across the glass and continuing going, they're ricocheting back up into space.
Glass. Occam's razor.
Glass. Occam's razor.
Produce a silly
You don't have to produce a silly documentary of where the Libyan desert glass came from. Megacryometeors, like I told you before. This is a mystery to scientists. Well, it's not a mystery any longer. It's a glass sky. Rainbows are formed because of glass sky. It's all because the Earth is concave and there's a glass sky. Sunlight bends around the inside of the Earth, and it projects. It goes through the glass, the birefringent glass sky, and makes the comet's tail. Simple, simple, simple. It's all so simple. Birefringence going on here with calcite. Same thing with Libyan desert glass. Double suns, birefringence, birefringence. It's all right there, guys. It's no longer a mystery. The Earth is concave. Just think, I don't even get paid for this. I tell you the truth, I don't even get paid. These guys tell you a bunch of phony baloney, and they get paid millions of dollars. But you can't serve two masters. Can't serve both God and money. And I shall work for the kingdom, not for price nor reward. I live by city and set the captives free, so it's okay. It works out in the end. Truth is free. It's all for you guys. Okay. That's enough of that. Thank you for watching.